Let's talk about a case that is just deeply tragic and incredibly confusing. It's the murder of 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell. This is a story that didn't just shatter a small town's sense of safety. It left behind this twisted trail of shocking turns, a really controversial informant, and, believe it or not, a confession that somehow only made the whole thing more of a mystery. Okay, let's get into it.
It all kicked off with a phone call that no parent ever wants to get. On February 9th, 2010, a sheriff's deputy calls Mackenzie's dad, Reed, to tell him they found his daughter's car and it was abandoned. And his response, it's just chilling. Yeah, I'm missing my car and the girl that drives it. Right there, a father's absolute worst nightmare was starting to become real.
You know, Wenatchee, Washington is supposed to be one of those idyllic places. It's famous for its apple orchards, this beautiful apple blossom parade. It's the kind of place where you think nothing bad ever happens here. But in 2010, a truly horrific crime would tear that image apart and expose a darkness that would change the town for good.
And just look at this timeline. It shows you how terrifyingly fast everything went wrong. At 3 in the afternoon, Mackenzie is on camera leaving her school. Totally normal. But by 5:40, her dad tries to call her and it goes straight to voicemail. Later that same night, her car turns up, abandoned. And then, just 4 days later, the search is over in the most heartbreaking way possible. Her body is found on the banks of the Columbia River. The details of what was done to her were just unspeakable. This wasn't just a murder. The level of violence told investigators they were dealing with someone incredibly vicious. And the attempted dismemberment? That was something that signaled a kind of rage that left even the most seasoned detectives completely stunned.
So the response was huge. They put together this massive statewide task force, pulling in the best investigators from all over the region. I mean, it was one of the biggest investigations the area had ever seen. But right from the get-go, they just started hitting one frustrating brick wall after another.
You know how it goes. First, they look at the people closest to her. Her boyfriend? He had an airtight alibi, so he was cleared pretty quick. Then there was her mom's boyfriend. He'd had a massive fight with Mackenzie the day before she went missing, so he was definitely a person of high interest. But there was absolutely zero physical evidence to connect him to the crime. With the whole inner circle cleared, the case basically stalled out.
And then, right when the trail was going completely cold, this police informant steps forward with a story that was so wild, so dramatic, it looked like it was about to blow the entire case wide open. Her name was Liz Reed, a woman who, let's just say, was well acquainted with the town's darker side. What Liz claimed was nothing short of explosive. She told the cops that 2 local drug dealers had killed Mackenzie, thinking she was someone else. But here's the part that just changes everything. She said they recorded the whole thing and then showed her the snuff film. Can you even imagine?
So this is the million-dollar question, right? Could they actually trust this person? Liz Reed had a long history as a drug user and an informant, and she was known for, not always telling the truth. The entire direction of this massive investigation was now hanging by a thread, and that thread was the word of a deeply unreliable narrator.
Well, after months of pouring time, money, and manpower into finding this supposed video, they found nothing. Zilch. And when the pressure was on, Liz Reed's story completely fell apart. She took it all back, even claiming the police had threatened her. And just like that, the lead that had consumed the task force for months totally collapsed. Okay, so with the whole informant thing turning out to be a massive dead end, the case was right back at square one. It was cold. But then investigators got another tip, this time from a different informant, and it pointed them somewhere they hadn't looked before. Inside Mackenzie's own beauty school. They go back and review the security footage from the school, and this time, they see it. They see a classmate, Christopher Wilson, leaving from the same back door that Mackenzie used, just 72 seconds after she did. Suddenly, the police had a person of interest who was right there with her in what were likely her final moments. So immediately, these 2 completely different narratives about Chris Wilson start to form. On one hand, the prosecution paints him as this dark, creepy misfit who was obsessed with death and serial killers. He even had a tattoo of Hannibal Lecter. But his defense team, they argued he was just an artsy, eccentric kid in a small town, guilty of being weird maybe, but not of being a killer. But pretty soon, this case moved way beyond his personality or his tattoos and into the world of hard evidence. And what they found was stunning.
First, Wilson's DNA was found on a piece of duct tape near Mackenzie's body. And second, and this was the big one, investigators found a huge stain of Mackenzie's blood soaked deep into the carpet of his old apartment. So, 8 months after Mackenzie was killed, Chris Wilson was arrested. According to the police reports, he showed absolutely no emotion, denied everything, and the first thing he did was ask for a lawyer.
And this, right here, is where the story takes its most bizarre and frustrating turn. You've got what looks like a slam dunk DNA case, right? Everyone is expecting a big, dramatic trial. But what happened instead was a controversial legal deal that honestly left everyone with way more questions than answers.
This is the key question that still hangs over the entire case. The evidence looked absolutely solid. Her blood in his apartment, his DNA at the scene. So why on earth would the district attorney even consider offering a plea deal instead of going for a murder one conviction? It just doesn't make sense.
And the answer, which came from the prosecutor himself, is pretty shocking. He said he could prove Mackenzie's blood was in Wilson's apartment, absolutely. But what he couldn't prove was that Chris Wilson was physically in the apartment at the same time the blood got there. That one little gap, that one piece of reasonable doubt, was a big enough risk that he was willing to make a deal.
So here's how it all went down. They start jury selection, and it becomes obvious that something like 85% of the town already thinks Wilson is guilty. So facing a jury that's almost guaranteed to convict him, Wilson starts getting cold feet about a trial. The DA sees an opening and offers a new deal. Plead guilty to manslaughter and you'll get 14 years. And at the very last minute, he took it. So in this packed courtroom, the unbelievable happens. The judge reads a statement out loud, a statement where Chris Wilson admits to kidnapping and killing Mackenzie Cowell. And when the judge asks him, "Mr. Wilson, are those the things that you did?" Chris Wilson just looks up and says, yes. He confessed, right there in open court. But the story doesn't stop there, because now we're left with two completely opposite truths existing at the same time. The public record says Chris Wilson is a convicted killer who confessed to the crime. But privately, ever since that day, Wilson has claimed that he was framed by the police and only took the deal to avoid a life sentence that he was sure a biased jury was going to hand.
So we're left with this deep, really unsettling feeling. I mean, there's a legal resolution, but the actual truth feels as murky as ever. A man stood up in court and said, yes, I did it, but now insists he's innocent. The case is officially closed, but for so many people, it was never really solved. And it leaves you wondering, what is the real secret that's still buried out there by the river?